Hey Tracy, can you hear us? She might. Maybe I'll jump on her computer.
This works. Testing.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, the last thing that I need, Zach, is a microphone. Mayor Gear needs a microphone. I don't need no microphone. Put it up front.
Hey Tracy.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you able to let people in the meeting? The way I made you a co-host.
What?
I made you a co-host. Are you able to let people into the meeting?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna let you do that then, so I can get.
Okay, I can handle it.
All right, thanks.
Okay, that's not too bad. That'll work.
No, it's fine. Where'd you guys get all that equipment from? There's a guy right at the bottom of that Southwest 9th Bridge. What's it called?
That's radial engineering looks like.
Yeah, that's not that.
Yeah, I'm just looking.
That exemption.
After a young African-American man was shot and killed.
That exemption is interstate, isn't it? 555. It's 3 5s in Arkansas. That's what I told. That sounds right. That's what I told Commissioner Furman. We could double check on that. I'm sure Director Marlin knows exactly which interstate it is. For sure. I'm sure he does. Hi, Scott.
Kind of lonely with you, Joe.
Just me and you. Come on over.
The Skywalk correspondent.
Yes.
That's
We'll remember one day.
That's
I don't know what why you would. I just
They started doing that during the pandemic to keep people out.
which you should do.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Well, exactly. We had a nice conversation with the Iowa DOT and about 43 of our favorite friends about the redesignation. One of the 5 today. That was a great conversation. You ever do anything with that, Chris?
It's been some time.
He was on. He just says it the way it is. I mean, we're wasting our time. You're either gonna give us an exemption, or we're all gonna work together, or we're all just gonna scream at each other and waste our time. And I mean, he's right.
Yeah.
I got to know him pretty well when we did the local option sales tax, and he kind of helped us with some strategies and things like that. I considered him the Jerry Crawford of the politics side.
They're about the only two people who ever made money out of politics.
I know, and that's true.
The rest of us idiots are just like, what are we doing?
I know. You're exactly right.
That's okay. This is what it's about.
I didn't even know I got paid when I got elected in the city council. I was shocked. She was like, "I need to cancel check," and I was like, "For what?" I'm like, "Put your pay in there," and I was like, "What?"
Oh, that's great.
The best thing was the healthcare. I was like, "I get healthcare too. I don't have to pay for it in my restaurant."
That's fabulous.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Well, particularly for somebody like you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your healthcare's outrageous.
Oh, no. Yeah, I was like, well, yeah, that's great. I'll take that. Isn't that just my pay? I'll just take that.
As shareholders, we James Brown's we pay around. My wife teaches Montessori school. Every time I she taught in public school.
No, you don't.
I have to listen to you.
Huh?
I have to listen to just.
Yeah, no, you don't. Hey, whatever. Are we muted? Am I muted?
Not right now, no. Do you want to be muted?
Yes.
Hey, Zach, what's the password for MPO gas?
It is. Gosh, it's been so long since I've seen it. It's welcome 123, capital W.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Carl. Hello.
Yeah. Whether it was whatever it was.
No, I finally.
We do have quorum.
Joe, are you ready to go back on here? We're seeing if people can see the screen real quick before we. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, might be useful for them.
Welcome, everybody. Just be a second. We'll go ahead and get started there. Checking some technical things here in our room. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
I can.
All right. We have quorum. I can't tell who's on there.
Yes, we have quorum.
Excellent. Well, welcome, everybody. Today is May 20th, 4 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get our policy committee meeting started. Call this meeting to order. Item number 2 is vote on the approval of the agenda.
I'll move McCoy.
Second, Reba.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 3 is vote on the approval of the meeting minutes from our April 15th meeting. Todd, do you want to touch on this at all?
Yeah, real quick. We just had one correction. David Jones was present at the meeting by phone and we had him listed as absent. So we've updated the minutes and would recommend approval.
Excellent. Any discussion or questions? I would entertain a motion.
Move
Move to
McCoy.
approve, Randleman. Second.
McCoy moved it and Randleman second there. Tracy. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 4 is consent and vote on the approval of the financial statement. Todd.
That was included in your packet. Nothing real out of the ordinary on transactions. We would recommend approval.
Any questions for Todd?
Move. Coleman.
Second, Reba.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 5 is consent and vote on contracts and expenses. Todd, you want to touch on this?
Sure. We just a bill from Davis Brown for some legal services related to the agreements for the build grant, a little over $6,300. Recommend approval.
Move.
Second, Randleman.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 6 is the time for our public comment on any MPO actions. Is there anyone from the public on the line that would like to make any comments?
Not aware of any.
All right, we'll move on to item 7 is report and vote on Fiscal year 2021 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Amendments. Dylan?
Thank you. As we get towards the end of the fiscal year, we have the need to make a slight amendment to our current budget. This will allow us to better use the time that's remaining in the budget as we get through the last couple of months. So if you go to the next slide, it shows what we are currently proposing. So on the far right column, you can see that we are basically shifting around $100,000 worth of funds, taking 50,000 each out of 1 and 6 and distributing those across 3, 4, and 5. So there's no change to the overall budget amount. This is just an internal shuffling to better use what remaining time we have across our various work elements. If there's any questions about that, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, we'd ask for your approval, and then we will send this on to the DOT to file away, and this will allow us to do our reimbursements in the coming months.
Dylan, thank you. Any questions for Dylan? All right, this is a voting item, so I'd entertain a motion.
Move it, McCoy.
Second, Burgess.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 8 is a report and vote on fiscal year 2022 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. Dylan?
Yes, thank you. So we have before you today the final work program and budget for next fiscal year, so starting in July. Just kind of walking through this a little bit in terms of the work program part of it, there are 8 various work elements that you see there on the screen. The first 6 of them are the DOT funded work elements that we get through our normal planning contract with the DOT. And then 7 or 8 are contracts. So 7 is our contract that we've had for several years with SERPA. 8 are the other contracts that we have with the watershed management authorities, the housing trust funds, and so forth. All of these help, at least 1 through 6, help us achieve the goals of Mobilizing Tomorrow or the requirements that are placed upon us by federal requirements or the current transportation bill. Some notable projects that we have coming up for the fiscal year are included there. I won't read those all one by one, but these are notable in that they're not something we do every year. These are kind of something we do periodically every couple of years. There are also things that we have worked through our technical committee, our planning engineering subcommittees, our various roundtables, and so forth. So these come with a lot of support from those various groups, I guess is the point to get across there. We came to you in March with a draft budget and work program. We sent that on to the Iowa DOT, Federal Highway, and Federal Transit for their comments. They were pretty minor, mainly just tweaking some language to make sure we're really complying with the federal requirements placed upon us. We also had to adjust the SERPA amount. That amount was reduced from what we showed you before by about $12,000, mainly because SERPA just didn't have as much funding available for what we traditionally do. So we reduced that, and then we had to shift some other expenses to make sure that all balanced out. We did add one project since the last time, and that was a request from the city of Des Moines for a downtown parking analysis from their staff. But otherwise, it's pretty minor changes from what you saw last time. On these next couple of slides, we're showing the budget portion of this. And again, this has not really changed a lot since last time. The only thing being that SERPA amount for the revenue and then some expenses to balance that out. So as we discussed last time, I believe when we showed this to you, something that's different this year is that we've added in the 2 build grants and their match for that. So the build grants for the water trails and Transload, as well as the matching funds for those. So that's why our revenue and our expenses are so much larger. Typically, they're maybe $1.5 million or so, $2 million. Now they're $48 million. So that's a big change, but this will allow us to better align with our audit when we do our audit at the end of the year. And then in terms of expenses, again, this is similar to what we showed last time too. And you'll see there in the bottom right, the difference is we're pretty much coming out a net zero gain in terms of the end of the year, only a $50 difference or so. So if there's any questions about the budget, I'm happy to take those or address any comments or anything like that. Otherwise, we need to have this approved by the end of the month so we can get it to the DOT so that it can take effect by the beginning of the year, fiscal year.
Dylan, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I'd be happy to move it. The executive committee took a deep dive into it, and I think this is a good plan for the next year.
Thank you.
The one thing thanks. And one thing I didn't note, but that did happen, is we did take this through the finance subcommittee, and they vetted this and have their blessing on it as well.
Thanks, Dylan. So it's been moved. Do we have a second?
Second, Reba.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 9 is report and vote on the federal fiscal year 2021-2024 Transportation Improvement Program Amendment. Shiroshi, I think you're going to give us an update on that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the item before you for your consideration is a TIP amendment request by DART to adjust funding for their transit formula projects. These budget adjustments have been approved by the DART Commission at their April meeting, and the MPO technical and executive committee members have also recommended approval of the amendment request. I did want to give you a little bit more background on the amendment request itself. As you can see, there are a few bullet points here which kind of lays out the various adjustments that are occurring over here. The first 3 bullet points, as you can see, there's not really a net increase or decrease in the total amount. It's just funding being moved around between the various programs. And there's a couple reasons why this is happening. One of the reasons is that there are just changing conditions in the community and needs. The second reason being that there are some old DART grants that are expiring with money left over, and essentially DART is moving the money around so that they're able to use that grant money for other projects that do have need in the community. So for instance, the very first bullet point, the rideshare vehicles, due to the pandemic, there was a significant decrease in the demand for paratransit services. And so that funding that's available is being moved to preventative maintenance services. The next 2 bullet items, the money left over from the older grants that are expiring is being utilized for purchase of the larger and smaller buses, which essentially frees up money to be utilized for other operations and maintenance services. Finally, the last bullet point is additional funding. And this is pandemic relief funding through the SRSA program that became available and is being utilized for subcontracted paratransit operations, as well as new bus shelters. So in summary, that's kind of the adjustments that are occurring here and is driving the TIP amendment. We support the TIP amendment request, and we are asking for your support as well to go ahead and make the changes in our TIP. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiroshi. Any questions or comments? This is a voting item, so I would entertain a motion if there's no comments.
Move McCoy.
Second, Randleman.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 10 is report and vote on the federal fiscal year 2021-2024 Transportation Improvement Program amendments. Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you. This is a second TIP amendment request, and the sponsor for this TIP amendment request is the Iowa DOT, requesting us to add a new project that has received federal funding through the NHPP program. As you can see there, the project is a repaving project for the eastbound exit ramp on the US 65 West interchange. The federal aid amount is $697,500. The The tip amendment is to add this project to the 2021 through 2024 tip. Other than that, there are no other tip modifications. We are supportive of this tip amendment request. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Any questions? Comments? This is a voting item.
Move to approve, Randleman.
Second.
Second it, Boson.
Who seconded?
Boson.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 11 is a report and vote on the federal fiscal year 2019-2023 passenger transportation plan amendment from Allison.
Yes, thank you. Similar to the tip amendment you all just reviewed, this microtransit program, as well as some of the shelters and bus replacements, also need to be updated and amended in the passenger transportation plan. This is because that plan allocates the 5310 funds, which is the special need programs that specifically looks to increase mobility for those over 65 and or those with disabilities. You can see there on the right, the adjustments, no major changes, just another shift around. And this was approved by the DART Commission in April 2021, as well as the Transportation Technical Committee and Executive Committee of the MPO this month. Staff recommends approval, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions?
I'll move it, Gare.
Do we have a second?
Reba.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion passes. Item number 12 is a report and vote on the salary and compensation review matrix from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. After my review was done a few months ago, the executive committee asked us to develop a salary and review matrix. We'd had something in place, but they wanted us to refine that and add some different things to it. We looked at a number of different agencies around the Metro, as well as other MPOs, and developed the salary schedule and matrix that was in your packet, and also looked at salary comparisons as well. That final draft is, as I said, is in your packet. If approved, this would take effect for reviews that start next month and go into effect for fiscal year 2022. Is that the only slide we have, guys? I couldn't remember. No, that's the only slide. We did modify one little piece on the increase piece. We talked about using the consumer price index for the Midwest area, and that can vary quite significantly in percentage wise. So we limited that to a 1% to 3% instead of sometimes it's well over 5%. So we wanted to narrow that down a little bit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Todd, thank you. One thing I might add is we do have a committee to review the director. Hopefully we'll have that done by July 1 this time, so we can get caught up. I know he's always about, it seems like 10 or 12 months behind. It'll be Supervisor McCoy, Mayor Anderwig, and Councilman Weaver will do the review. If anyone has any input for any of them, they can contact one of those three or myself, and I can forward it to them. Is there any other questions or comments? This is a voting item, so I'd entertain a motion.
Move it,
Move
McCoy.
to second, Burgess.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 13 is a report on the Purple Heart Highway update from Todd.
Yeah, thank you. We've had some conversations with the DOT and Federal Highway on some additional studies that need to be carried out or they're asking us to carry them out to further the process of interstate designation. We've developed a scope of services with the DOT Federal Highway and a consultant to do some traffic operations report, some safety analysis, and making sure the design criteria that were used fit for an interstate. So those have, that scope's been developed. We have an estimated cost of around $230,000 to do that study. We can move forward with that whenever the board is ready to do that. We did talk at exec last week of holding on that maybe until next month, and pending further conversations with the DOT, Federal Highway, and some of the partner agencies. I did talk with the partnership and the airport about contributing to the cost of that study, and they're both agreeable to participating in that cost, working on what that contribution would be from each entity. The airport has some issues with using funding off airport, so they're working through that. Earlier today, we did have a meeting with the committee that the DOT put together to task force, I guess they're calling it, on the interstate designation that involved a few members of the board here, some of the communities along the way, Farm Bureau, some of the ag interests and farmers along the corridor, or that go along the corridor, and the DOT. It was a spirited discussion, and the DOT was asked to come back with some ideas on how to best move forward on getting some of the changes we need in state code, and as well as the federal waivers for overweight permits for vehicles. Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure, I would say spirited was a good description of the discussion that we had, Todd, today. I think that it was clearly stated to everyone that was on the line that we're not trying to change the way that the road is used by our ag community. We understand the importance of that, but we also understand that we would like this designation to move forward with their help, hand in hand with them. But it just seemed like with the comments that we got, the DOT was, and Andy, I'm sure you're on the line and don't take this personal, was trying to pit us against each other instead of having us work with each other. And I think we've gotten through that with today's meeting. I think it's firmly in the DOT's hands of whether they're going to recommend to the federal highway if we can have an exemption similar to what they've had in Arkansas. I think that's the best way, and I think everyone was in agreement of that today after the meeting. That's the road that we need to take. I have been in conversations with Commissioner Furman and reached out to the director and going to work that side of it as long Representative Losey was on the line also, and I know that he has worked some of the legislation portion of it through the House that will probably be tackled next year. But it firmly lies on the DOT. And Andy, if you want to make some comments, we can't go any further without them recommending this to the feds. That they would see the only way to get this done is the exemption. None of the member communities that want this done is going to participate in an alternative route of $10 to $12 million. That doesn't seem fair to any of us, that we would need to do that when the highway is going to be used basically like it's been used since it's been built. And there was a lady that commented towards the end of the meeting that is a farmer and travels with farm equipment, that I think her comments were very, very good, that you know, she didn't see the harm in the ag community of using it along as it's been used going forward with the minimum speed limits and things like that. So we'll continue to work down that path. Andy, you're more than welcome to make some comments. I would encourage you to, but I think that's how I paraphrase the spirited comments that we had today.
I think you summed it up pretty well there, Joe. You know, I would agree that it was very spirited, and you know, when you start talking about, removing the possibility of utilizing that as they're doing, not just the farmers, but other parts of the ag community. And I understand that, but, we're just trying to work through this process. We've been asked by Director Marler to work through a task force type project. Even Todd kind of said, really, more of a committee kind of, but, we need to get through this. So we kind of needed to get through looking at all of the ideas. And, you guys kind of came into it thinking there was only one idea. And I guess I'm trying to be more open-minded on the side, and err on the side of safety, because, like I said in the meeting, if we do, achieve interstate designation and economic development growth occurs, and now all of a sudden, instead on the upper end of 30,000, we're at 50,000 vehicles a day. I'm guessing there's going to be some incidents. So, we also talked about comparing it to Arkansas, excuse me. And, we have made some contact with the district engineer down there, and, they haven't had, significant issues, but their 4 or 5 mile section of roadway is, about half the volumes that we have, and it's out in a rural area. So some of those things are very comparative, and some, they're a little different than ours. And I've made that conversation here as well. Just, we're on the urban fringe here, definitely metro area, and the traffic is. So, I just trying to proceed slowly, I guess. And from that standpoint, I think the message was well received today. And, frankly, I've been trying to tell them that's the decision that we're going to end up having to make. But, I'm district planner, I'm not director. So I, following the process that my boss gave me, and I'm working through this process. And I know that it seems maybe, a little hard over the course there, but I think in the end, we're going to get a good product. And, we just want to make sure it's safe, Joe.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all of those comments, and you're absolutely correct with everything that you said. I think we all don't want to see any accidents on that road, and we would work diligently with whatever signage. I know you talked about some special signage that we can put up, and maybe some times that farm equipment wouldn't be in the peak hours of, where we would see that 30,000, the peak hours of folks traveling. I think there's a way around it where we can work with some of the safety issues and the amount of cars on the road, and share it well with our ag community, because it's very important in our state, as we all know, agriculture, and we want to work with them and not against them.
Oh yeah, and even the lady that spoke up at the end said that, normally she stays out of those busy times.
Right.
My guess is if I went back through that information, I could probably, I would imagine there's, more vehicles during the daytime, non-peak hours. So that's something might be something I could look into as well, just to verify.
That would be fantastic if we could get that information. I mean, since you have that, you can look at the times. That would be something that we can look at, as we go forward with using it and sharing it and becoming, together on this. We could maybe look at some times that we could suggest to the director and to the legislation that, this maybe could be the times, and be able to, work with Farm Bureau and make sure that works with them and the ag community.
Yeah, and I do think that part of the analysis that the federal highway is going to require for this interstate designation is going to be that safety analysis. And I think a more detailed safety analysis will give us some more information on that safety side to help us, make that. Obviously, we don't have that now, but as we progress, through this, and like you said, working together. So I'm going to be off next week, but I assume that, I know that Mitch, who's used to be the highway division director, and now just the field operations division director with our reorganization, who's our boss. So he handles all the districts and organizes all that. Already talked with Tony, and they're, going to be, working this over and talking about it. So I think the meeting today, definitely stimulated that movement there. So we'll be working and getting back to, having a good decision at the next meeting and seeing where we go from there.
Hey, Andy.
Yes.
This is Elizabeth with Altoona, and I probably should have piped up during the meeting earlier this afternoon to ask this question. I think Carol from the Farm Bureau might have raised it as well, but when they, fast forward interstate designation, does the governor's harvest weight proclamation, so when they were talking about the overweight exemption that's during generally harvest, but sometimes planting as well, would that be then allowed, or because would that be encompassed into an exemption that the governor would still be able to allow that? Because I see it just, I'll be the first to admit, I'm a farm kid, right? I came from the rural part of the state, so I may have a little bit of a more in tune touch point with some of this than others. But there's the slow moving vehicles that are one side of it, and then there's the overweight vehicles, which are moving grain. They're your normal semis that are not going to be slow moving vehicles, but they're definitely going to be overweight, especially during harvest. So would she still be able to allow that exemption on this?
Well, I believe so. I think those are two separate things. The speed is because there's right now, the speed limits are regulated by the states, and posting minimum speeds was delegated back to us by the feds in the 90s. So some states post, some don't. We do, and that would have to change. But the weight restriction is something that goes with federal highway and with the national level, because they protect the weights on those interstates. Now there is an area up in Sioux City area, because it's a tri-state area, that they allow heavier weights up there, and there was there's some should be some legislation guidance there, because they did push that through to make sure that those large ag weight limit vehicles that are allowed in the other states could travel through Iowa, so they didn't have to devise those loads up somehow. So there should be some pretty good examples there, but that should, I think, I don't know, we'll have to do a little more investigation, but I guess that she, her harvest allowance doesn't hit the interstate because federal highway regulates the weight on it. So if you get the weight restriction lifted, in my mind, I guess her harvest, proclamation would allow it there.
I think like what we heard from Tracy Gaffman, I think when he's saying $2,000 or 2,000 trucks a year going into ADM, those are semis, that's not slow moving vehicles, right? So the bulk of that traffic, the co-op sector is going to be worried about the weights, not so much the speeds. But again, just maybe a little bit more of my Aggie hat on than otherwise, but just point of curiosity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Andy. This is Ruth, and I too apologize. I should have probably asked this question during our meeting this afternoon, but does the additional safety studies include, does the analysis include what happens if vehicles, slow moving vehicles are moved to the secondary roads? In other words, we could just be trading one safety situation for another. So does it include that as well?
Todd, do you recall if it included anything like that? I don't think it did.
No, it doesn't. In my recollection of the scope, it just looks at the 565 corridor.
Yeah, I'm just saying that needs to be considered at some point, that while if there's a safety analysis for this road, if there's a change, we have now created another safety situation for the secondary roads that needs to be considered.
Understood.
Great comments. Thank you, everyone. Anyone else have any comments? And enjoy your week off. You deserved it.
Thank you.
Item number 14 is a report on the quarterly budget report from Dylan.
Thank you. At the end of each quarter, we like to provide you an update with where we're at in terms of spending throughout the year. On page 25 of the agenda packet is the most recent one of these reports that would go through the end of March. In looking at this, there's really no areas of concern. We're pretty much right on track as far as the overall costs. There's a few categories that are higher or lower though there's reasons for that, we spend all of our, certain amounts earlier in the year than later in the year, those kinds of things. So everything looks pretty good from our end. If there's any questions about that, we're happy to take them. But otherwise, this is just for your information.
Dylan, thanks. Any questions for Dylan? All right, item number 15 is a report on the EJ report update from Allison.
Thank you. Just wanted to bring this up back for an update. We put together a subcommittee at the request of the MPO Executive Committee last winter. It was very cold when we were here. It convened twice to review and discuss the federal requirements as well as the methodology and then funding implications. And so we're bringing back a recommended amended methodology, and then MPO staff will be working on this funding targets. And I just want to give a short shout out to all the people who did participate. It was a good discussion, and I appreciate you all taking that time. You can go on to the next slide. So as we all know, the MPO had historically used a regional average as a threshold by calculating that. And you can see that on the second and third column there in the table. What the subcommittee's recommendation is to use a top 30 or the 70th percentile as a threshold instead, to really kind of hone in on that top group of disadvantaged people. And so you can see that there on the right, not too big of a change within the percentages, but it does cap the number of census tracts for any of the degrees of disadvantage at 34, since the MPO planning area is 113 census tracts. You can go on. And so this is how that shakes out. It really brings it back to the urban core. Again, we do have those two tiers. So the highest concern would be that in purple, really sticks right along that urban core, and then the moderate concern is in the blue. So you can see a couple of those still out in the suburbs. Next slide. So some of the next steps, we're going to report out to you all. So this is the third this month. We will be bringing this back for approval in June. So you'll hear more again from me. Once that's approved, we will update all of our online mapping, as well as integrate this into the MPO planning processes. And then MPO staff, before the next funding cycle, plans to review the funding mechanisms. And this subcommittee recommended having a targeted slot or targeted amount of funding go into EJ, just like we do roads and things like that. And so we'll be reviewing how that we can work that in. So this is up for your review now. I'll bring it back next month for approval, but I'd be happy to take any questions you have at this time.
Allison, thank you. Comments, questions?
Joe, I'll start. Matt kept us focused, and I really appreciate this, because this is a really important thing, and I want to thank Allison and the MPO staff that worked hard on it. We sent them back to the drawing board a couple of different ways and asked them to bring back several options. So it was a lot of work, but I would just say in a year like we've been through in society, focused in on economic and racial justice issues and others, this is a really important thing that we get right. And I think because we have a proposal here that is right, it's going to put us in a position to maybe attract additional money to neighborhoods and communities that really need it. I don't think anybody's trying to use this report as a way to just move, create a shell game of money moving around, but how can we create better opportunities for the toughest neighborhoods and the toughest populations in our region? So I'm strongly in favor of this, and I'm very proud of the report and the work that the MPO did. I would also just say that I wish the media and others that like to make a big deal about elected officials not getting along as a metro area, I wish they could have been a part of our discussions, because you had a Polk County supervisor and suburban leaders that were some of the strongest voices on doing the right thing in this process. And I just want to commend all those people that were leading and contributing to this, because I was really impressed by everybody's input.
Thanks, Chris. This is Matt. I agree with everything you just said, and was very impressed with the cooperation of everybody, and especially appreciated the hard work of Allison and herding cats that she did to keep us moving towards our goals. So thank you, Allison.
Anyone else? I would, I know during the exec meeting, Mayor Garrett brought up the scoring criteria, how it would be, you know, I would like to see that worked out through the funding committee next month and before you present it to the exec and through this policy committee. If we can work that through there, and you guys as a team, Allison, I know it's probably asking a lot, but I know that you've jumped through hoops on this thing and you've been a rock star, and we've really appreciated it. And I would like to just get everybody's questions answered and get it through all the committees and get it passed or failed, I guess, next month would be my recommendation to you and to staff.
Noted, and we'll do our best to do that.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to item number 16 is a report on the Economic Development District update from Gunnar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Real quick update on the process to create an economic development district. As a recap, we are out of phase one. We weighed support, and there is strong support in all 7 counties. We are into phase 2, which is the creation of the entity. And then the next phase, which we hope to enter this fall, will be the designation process. And finally, we hope to be fully operational by next year. Next slide, please. So for the development of the CEDS, we laid out an aggressive timeline, and it is due to the fact that if we continue to move at this brisk pace, we could potentially be in line for funding as early as next year. So we're trying to keep things hustling. We did form a steering committee in April, and then it was actually ended up being in early May that we held a SWOT analysis and goal setting session with our stakeholders. We're going to move into project selection, and the drafting of the document is already underway, but we hope to have finalized documents by July for review and revision to set us up for submitting all of our documentation in August. Next slide. So quickly on the SWOT analysis and goal setting session, I know a couple of you on the call were in attendance. Thank you very much for being here. We had a very good discussion, and we are in the process of analyzing that feedback and drafting recommended language for the comprehensive economic development strategy. Staff is also working to define that process for project inclusion, and we're getting ready for our next steering committee meeting early next month. That's all I have prepared for you, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Gunnar. Any questions? All right, item 17 is a report on fiscal year 2022-2025 Transportation Capital Improvement Program from Allison.
Thank you. Just wanted to give you an update. Every year we do put together the Transportation Capital Improvement Program, or TCIP. And so we will be starting that process here shortly. MPO staff will be requesting information from mostly our technical transportation committee members, and we will be putting that together by August. In addition to roads, bridges, and some of the other typical things that we usually have in the TCIP, in years past, we've also integrated the water trails improvements and have asked for kind of inventory of what cities are doing there. As part of our Polk County hazard mitigation planning process contract, we also are including a request for any hazard mitigation projects that cities have put on the ground. And then we're also including green infrastructure projects this year as part of our WMA and Polk County contract as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions or comments? All right, item number 18 is a report on fiscal year 2022-2025 Transportation Improvement Program Development from Shiroshi.
Yes, thank you. This is a quick update on the status of the Transportation Improvement Program development for this year. The MPO is required to develop the TIP annually and includes a list of all federally funded projects in the region for the next 4 federal fiscal years. So we began working on this process earlier this year, and we have received input from all our member communities regarding the federally funded projects that they have going on for the next 4 years. We are in the process of developing the TIP project list as well as the draft TIP document. Our goal is to have the document ready by the end of this month, following which we enter into a public comment period to receive comments from the public as well as from our member communities. We are expected to submit a draft of the document to the Iowa DOT on June 15th to get their feedback. A final document is due to them on July 15th. We do, as I mentioned, have a 45-day comment period during which we encourage members of the public as well as our member communities to take a look at the TIP, including the project list, and give us any feedback that they might have. We also are going to schedule an online public meeting. The tentative date for that is June 23rd, 5 p.m. As we get that set up, we'll be sending out information to log into that meeting. So that's just a quick update for your information. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any comments, questions for Sarosi? All right, item 19 is a report on EV charging infrastructure and alternative fuel corridor designations from Allison.
We just wanted to give you a quick update. The Federal Highway Administration has been putting together a number of different white papers. The most recent and most applicable to this group. It includes a funding matrix and a report about electric vehicle charging infrastructure investments, and specifically how planning or installation or requirement could be fit into the STBG, RAISE, formerly BUILD, infra, and other funding mechanisms that our communities use. So we highly recommend folks check that out, and it will be integrated into some of the electric vehicle work that we're doing on staff. Another piece we just want to make you aware of, Federal Highway also put out their newest designations for alternative fuel corridors that are ready and pending. And so just to refresh your brains, I-35 and I-80 are alternative fuel corridors. 235 is not through the metro. So this is a possibility for the metro to work towards. State routes are also eligible for this. It's not just federal infrastructure. And so we just want to put that out there as well. And that this is not just for electric vehicles, but alternative fuel could include anything from natural gas to hydrogen, electric vehicles, and kind of everything in between. So we did put some links in your packet if you'd like to look more at that. And I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
Great, thank you, Allison. Any questions for Allison? All right, item 20 is a report on the Transload facility update from Zach.
Just want to give you a quick update on where we're at with the Transload facility. They've been spending the last few months doing a lot of grading and groundwork, prepping the site for utilities and their warehouse pad. We're still expecting the first reimbursement to come in anytime. Once that reimbursement comes in, we'll be working with the Federal Railroad Administration to get that first reimbursement completed. We're anticipating that's going to be a pretty smooth process, and they've indicated that they're going to be able to turn those reimbursements around within a week. So we're excited about that. We also prepared our quarterly report, which was due on April 30th, and submitted that to them, and that report has been approved by the FRA. We've got a few images to share with the committee. This one is looking to the east, just kind of showing what's happening on the ground. This is probably about maybe a little over a month ago now. And then this image is probably about 2 weeks old now. But you can see how much work they've gotten done as far as the groundwork goes. You kind of see in the middle of your screen there, that kind of really flat space there where they're prepping that pad for the warehouse. So exciting to see all the work that's going on site. This is just another image that shows the equipment out there operating on site. As far as schedule moving forward goes, I've got that bulleted out on the screen for you, kind of give you an idea of what's coming up. As far as this summer, a lot of work, site work and grading between East 15th and East 14th. The railroad work is scheduled to be completed in late October. As far as the work from East 18th to East 15th, that site work is going to take a little bit longer. They're anticipating January 2022 for that. There's some issues with being able to kind of do the work on their main entrance to the facility, just based on the work that's being done on the water main that goes through there. The warehouse is also scheduled to be completed in January of next year. And then as far as project completion and closeout, they're anticipating March of next year to close everything out. So that's the tentative schedule right now that we got an update on from Ryan a few weeks ago. So that's where we're at with the Transload facility, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Zach, thanks. Any questions for Zach? All right, item 21 is a water trails update from Todd.
Thank you. Continue working through the process with the partners on the water trails, and we're getting closer to having the final design and needing to turn in plans earlier in the summer. Working with the city on permits, working with the DOT, Federal Highway, the city, the county, and Central Iowa Water Trails on agreements. We have a meeting scheduled for next week with all those groups to kind of walk through all the various sub-agreements that are shown here on the screen. Most of them have been drafted. Some are a little further along than others, but we're getting close on those. The design is nearing completion. There's some things they're still working out on a couple of the regional parks like Harriet and the Marina on some dock locations. We're also working on how the construction is going to be phased over the construction seasons, probably 2 construction seasons. We had a meeting maybe 2 weeks ago where the bid plans were set out by the DOT, and some contractors had the opportunity to look at them and comment on them. There were some discussions about how they would de-water the area where they're doing construction in the river. That led to some discussion on budget, and the design team put in a rather large number for the dewatering, which bumped the project cost up. So now they're kind of refining that and looking at how they can best approach that to bring that cost back down. It was kind of just a number thrown in there as a placeholder. So we're working through those issues currently as well. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Todd? All right, thanks, Todd. We'll move on to item 22 is a report on a legislative update from Dylan.
Thank you. I've got several things here to talk to you about, especially on the federal level. So first, just an update from what we discussed, I think last time, which was when the House was requesting transportation reauthorization bill projects or earmarks. Once that was all said and done, there was 2,000 submissions from members of Congress. There were 23 from Representative Axte's district, totaling about $86 million. If you recall, the information that we had received and what Representative Axte's office had received was that each district would get about 15 to 20 million was the hopeful target there. So that just gives you a sense of how much paring down they'll have to be to get that, if and when they get to that final place in the reauthorization bill. Speaking of reauthorization bills, both the House, there's a lot of different bills going on there. So the House T&I committee still intends to move forward in the coming weeks. Initially, they said Memorial Day. Now they're saying maybe mid-June. Earlier, just a couple days ago, the House Republicans on the Transportation Committee rolled out their version of a bill, which they're calling the Starter 2.0 Act. This is a $40 billion bill or $400 billion bill over 5 years, which is the largest bill that would have ever existed, and just a 32% increase over current bills. Yet it's quite a bit smaller than what the some other bills that have been proposed, including the administration's bill. So they're all still working and trying to negotiate on this, but we'll start to see more formal bills being rolled out here in the coming months, given that the current bill expires at the end of September. If you go to the next slide, as I just mentioned, last time we talked about the House members having an earmark process. Now the Senate has announced they're going to have an earmark process. So the Appropriations Committee just announced this the other day, kind of similar to what the House did, although the House had a limit on they could only submit a certain number of projects going forward. We haven't yet seen any sort of limits on the House side. And the dates kind of range depending on which subcommittee. So the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee, their projects are due in June. So I imagine in the next couple of weeks, we will start hearing from the senators directly of how their process will work in terms of getting projects into them, likely similar to what the House did. So we'll be communicating that to our members once we know more information, but just so you're aware, that is probably coming down the pipe. A couple other federal things, COVID funding, as you might be aware, last week or 2 weeks ago, the Treasury Department finally released additional guidance for the American Rescue Plan. Transportation isn't specifically included in this, at least in the infrastructure section. That's more about water, sewer, broadband. However, there is a governmental services portion that might allow for transportation expenses, just given the certain conditions. Essentially, if a community might have lost funding, lost revenue because of COVID, there might be a way to reclaim some of that. So if you're interested in that, there's other resources through the League of Cities and others that can probably help you through that, but just so you're aware. Real quick before we get to this stuff too, just keeping it on the federal side of things, the census, there was a proposed rulemaking for the Census Bureau that could impact MPOs as well. I think we talked about this several months ago. This proposed rulemaking was announced back in February with comments due today. So just recently in the last couple of days, several organizations that the MPO, DART, and other organizations are a part of, including the Association of MPOs, the National Association of Regional Councils, American Public Transit Association, National League of Cities, National Association of Counties, all those different organizations came together and provided comments to that. We can send you their comment letter, but essentially they're pushing back on what is being proposed. Just real quick, what's being proposed includes using just how they define an urban area and changing from using population to using housing units, which could affect different communities depending on if they have a lot of summer, seasonal, resort towns and things like that. But also just could change what constitutes an urban area. And how that impacts MPOs is that the definition has always been an MPO is an urban area over 50,000. And now if they start changing what the urban area definition is, that could change what an MPO is. That could lead to funding changes. We're probably okay, but it just could have some ramifications that we're not quite sure of yet. And given that the 2020 census information has not been fully released to the local level, we don't really know what those impacts will be yet. So basically this letter says, we want you to delay, let us know more information about when we get once we get the actual numbers from the census, we'll have a better chance to look at this and go from there. So like I said, we can forward this letter on to you just so you're aware of it, but just wanted to keep you informed on that. And then the final slide, just based more on the state level, as you're aware, the legislature adjourned last night. There were two bills that we were kind of watching, or that were still alive that we were watching. One was the personal delivery devices authorization. This would allow the little kind of autonomous robots that are kind of the size of a cooler that would go up and down the street delivering things. That did pass the House and Senate. It's awaiting the governor's signature. This one does have a provision that would allow a local community to say they're not allowed in their jurisdiction. The other bill, House File 493, was just deals with bicycles and does a couple of things. It classifies a three-wheeled bicycle or trike as a conventional bicycle, so they fit the same rules and regulations. And it also deals with e-bikes and classifies those as bicycles, not as automobiles or motorcycles or things like that. That also passed the House and Senate, and as I last checked, has not been signed yet. But those are what we were watching. All that said, if there's any questions, comments, anything, please let me know. That's all I have for you.
Dylan, thanks. Any comments or questions for Dylan? All right, item number 23 is upcoming events. I don't believe there's any, so we'll move on to item 24. Is any non-action items of interest to the committee? Todd, do you have anything?
Not today.
All right. I would just point out that the next policy committee meeting will be former council member Chris Coleman's last meeting. And so it would be nice if we can get some folks down here, if everybody's comfortable being in the room and you're vaccinated. We could do some in-person meetings. And our next meeting would be June 17th. If there's nothing else from anyone, is there any other comments from anybody else or non-action items? All right, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.